Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to learn a little bit more about for loops, go a little bit deeper. We've already started and completed a few projects on this, so it's time to keep going. So here's the sort of objectives for today. We're going to learn how to use a for loop where instead of counting up, where I is 1, then 2, then 3, we're going to learn how to count down, so a decreasing counter variable. And then we're going to use other logic elements nested within a for loop, so we'll learn how to nest an if statement inside a for loop. All right, so here's how we'll do that. First, we'll review what for loops are in case you forgot. Then we'll learn how to make them count down, and then we'll nest a few ifs in there. Let's go, for loops. So you'll recall that a for loop is a loop. It's a piece of code that gets repeated over and over again, okay? And it's a very common loop, this for loop, so it's good to pay attention to this. It's in most programming languages. And the way it works is you say for starters, and then you name some new variable, which is going to be the counter. It's the thing that's going to count up every time you go around the loop. Usually we use I for that. And then we say equals, and then we say a low number to a high number, usually. So we would say 1 to 10. And that would mean that every time we go through the loop, the code in the middle would execute until we get to the next. And then we would go back to the beginning. The counter variable would get increased by 1 and keep going until we get to that high number. Okay? So for example, if I had for I is equal to 0 to 9, and then I had this next at the bottom, I could say message box of I, and this means that every time the code would go through this, we'd start here, we'd come down and I would start as 0, we get a message box that said 0, and then we would come back up to the top. I would become 1 as we moved closer to 9, and the message box would say 1. Then we go around again, I would become 2, and this would continue over and over again, and we'd get 10 different message boxes from 0 all the way up to 9. So what if we wanted to make our loops count down instead of count up? So this is a simple, easy skill to practice. We already learned that we can't do this. Maybe you didn't learn that, but you can't do this. So if you want your loop to count down, you can't just say for I is equal to 9 to 0. And the problem with that is the computer checks to see whether I is bigger than this number, generally. Okay, so in the beginning, if it starts as 9, it's already bigger than 0, and this loop's not going to execute at all. So this is no good. If you want your loop to count down, you can't just say for I is equal to a big number to a small number. That doesn't work. Instead, what you can do is you can do this, but you need to add, if you recall our special friend, the step number, right? If you add step, you can tell the computer how much you want it to jump from each round it goes through the loop. So if we said step of -1, that lets the computer know, hey, I'm counting down by 1 each time, okay? The default is step of +1, where I increases 1 at a time, but you can have a step of whatever you want. You can have a step of 2, you can have a step of -5, whatever works for you for the program that you're trying to create. So again, if you want your loops to count down, you can use a step of -1. That will make your number count down instead of up. So I want to show you one other thing about nested if statements, right? So we know our friend the if statement, okay? And we have a lot of other things like case statements, and we can have an if statement or a case statement or even another for loop or a different kind of loop that we're going to learn later inside an existing for loop. So for example, if I have this, right, for I is equal to 0 to 500, this is actually going to go around 501 times, right? Okay, so this loop's going to go 501 times, and every time it's going to give us a message box that says, we got to 350, woohoo! Okay, which is not what we want, okay? If we want the message box only to appear when we do get to 350, well, then we can add a little if statement on the inside if we want, like this. If I equals 350, then do my message box, and then there's my end if, right? So again, we could put anything we want inside a for loop. It doesn't just have to be one line of code. It doesn't have to be text box 1.text. It could be anything. And that's actually quite nice because then our if statements here can help us to pick out particular strokes through the loop, right? So the exact moment that I is 350, we can make something happen. Or if we want to check to see if I is an even number, we can do that. Or if we want to say, you know, if I is divisible by 10, then I want something special to happen, right? So we can use ifs inside. We can use case statements inside. We can embed anything we want inside this loop as long as we do it correctly. So you're going to have to play with that idea a little bit as you work on these next two assignments. Assignment 3 is called factorial function. What you're going to do is you're going to write a function that's going to find the factorial of something, remembering that factorial is like 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And assignment 4 is going to be called find factors. You're going to use that is divisible function that you made earlier to find all the factors that make up a number. So for example, you would say, all right, let's say 10 is my number. I'm going to find all the numbers that 10 is divisible by. So we'll start at 1. course, 10 is divisible by 1. 10 is divisible also by 2. It's not divisible by 3. It's not divisible by 4. And it is divisible by 5. It's not divisible by 6. And so on, all the way up to 10. So that's going to be an interesting one. Cool, that does it. So we remind ourselves what for loops do. We remind ourselves that if we want to make a for loop count down, we use step and then -1, right? And then we also realize that we can put if statements inside the loop to make certain things happen each time we go around. Don't forget when you're attacking these assignments that you have the debugging tools at your hands. Don't forget to set those breakpoints and watch what's happening as the code goes through. No new vocabulary for this one, so go ahead and get started with those assignments.